In Enter Other Transactions, there's been an update to a debit memo. So a debit memo basically lets you increase the balance of an invoice that was previously lowered, maybe by credit memo or by a payment. So let's say there was a payment that came in for an invoice where the client paid the original invoice amount and the late charge. Well, now what you can do is, if you're doing a debit memo on that existing invoice, you can now add debiting amounts for the late charge or the finance charge, depending on which one was used for the invoice. So as an example, I have an invoice and the amount of the invoice was $428.75 and there was a late charge of $42.88 and the late charge balance is zero. So that tells me the late charge balance zero, the balance zero, that they actually paid both of those amounts. Well, in the previous version, if you wanted to debit memo this invoice, you could only do the original invoice amount. You could not debit the late charge amount. So now I actually can put the late charge amount here. So I can debit both of those and say it was a return check. And so that way, if I save and close this and I post it as my last step, that particular invoice, the balance will now be the original invoice amount and the late charge amount will now be back on it.